City Center Radio. It is episode 204, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Monday, December 18th, 2023. It's Monday, but we're inching closer to Christmas, so hopefully this week won't be too bad. I have a feeling for many of us, it'll be a little bit shorter feeling than normal, maybe a little bit more relaxed, depending on the industry you are in, of course. I know a lot of jobs kind of slow down around this time of year, so hopefully yours is one of those and your week isn't too bad. In addition, despite the deluge we had late Saturday and most of the day Sunday, I hope all of you had a good weekend. Hope you all stayed safe out there and didn't have any issues with your property, whether it was flooding. Hopefully everyone's car was moved to a higher ground, especially if you lived in flood-prone areas like downtown Charleston. A bit of a mess out there, depending on where you lived or where you may have been traveling on Sunday. So I hope it wasn't too bad for you and didn't get your week started on a bad note. For me, pretty quiet weekend, not a whole lot going on. Watched a lot of sports. My UConn Huskies, both the men and women's basketball teams are playing pretty well, especially the men. The women have had a rough go of it, but are still ranked and plugging right along and getting better each time out. So looking forward to the remainder of that year. Sadly, my New York Giants lost on Sunday to the Saints. We had a nice run with Tommy DeVito out there. For any of you who pay attention to the NFL, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But that's really all that's been going on with me as I gear up for my last full week here in Charleston before heading home for the holidays. Excited to see my family back in Connecticut again, just like I did for Thanksgiving. But more on that at another point. Let's get into the news. State Representative Leon Stravrinakis has pre-filed a joint resolution to expand reproductive rights and freedoms in South Carolina, which could combat the state's current 6-week abortion ban, which we have talked about many, many times. And even though, yes, 6 weeks is the basic time frame, we all know this is essentially a complete abortion ban, as many people don't even know they're pregnant at that point. So the lawmaker who represents House District 119 said in a post on Twitter that his pre-filed legislation would order a statewide vote on the reproductive rights and freedom of the women in the state. The representative said, quote, "The people of South Carolina, not Columbia politicians, deserve to decide the issue for themselves, just like we have seen occur in other states," end quote. What he's referencing there is that over the last couple of years, citizens in other states had opportunities in different fashions, including just a straight up vote on the issue, to decide reproductive freedoms here in the United States after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, which sent that decision back to the states to make their own laws. So some states, had trigger laws that went into effect. South Carolina had one. It was ruled unconstitutional. They came back, and now they have a version that was approved by our state Supreme Court. So other states, though, have just straight up put it on the ballot, or there's other states with governors. There were certain political maneuvers that they were able to basically enshrine this right to an abortion within their state constitutions. You can look up the different ways other states have done it. But again, some have just put it on the ballot. And in those states that did do that, they have voted for obviously some differences, but essentially to reinstate Roe v. Wade. So South Carolina's ban, could be completely changed if they were to do that. Stravrinakis said it comes down to self-determination and the belief that reproductive choices should be left to a woman. So the lawmaker referred to a recent ruling in which a woman was denied an emergency abortion in Texas, which he believes did not take the life or well-being of the mother into account, and said those types of laws are draconian and radical. Have to agree with him there. If you're not familiar with this horrible, horrible story in Texas, a woman and her husband, maybe boyfriend, apologies, I forget their exact relationship, but they wanted a child, and they unfortunately found out their child has a condition. Again, for more specific details, you can find this online. I just want to hit the main points here, but has a condition where the child will likely not survive to the point of actually being born. Best case, quote unquote, scenario, the child is delivered and then could die within minutes to days, maybe even weeks after, due to this condition they have. This is a fatal disease. The child is not going to survive. Texas's law says that an abortion cannot be performed unless the woman's life is in danger. Of course, all of that is up to interpretation by doctors who are afraid to perform an abortion, even under these circumstances where the child isn't going to survive. Because what exactly is the woman's life being in danger? At what point does that come into effect? So we've seen this in other states too, where a pregnancy is not viable, or again, best case, the child will die shortly after childbirth, and a woman cannot get an abortion in those scenarios. I think even the most strict, well, I shouldn't say that because there's always extremists, but I think even people who think that whatever their state's abortion law is okay would agree that this is a situation where an abortion should be allowed. If you're still not convinced, although the mother's life currently isn't in danger, it could get to that point, which why do we have to force that in this type of situation? But also it could, according to her doctors, prevent her from being able to get pregnant again if she carries this birth to term, or to the point where they have to do an abortion because her life is in danger. Why does someone who wants to have a child have to be forced to carry this pregnancy to term that could, one, be detrimental to her, two, will cause pain and suffering to the child if it is born, and three, could prevent her from having a pregnancy later, which is what she wants. She wants to be able to get pregnant again. It makes no sense. But that's what we're seeing, because we had these states rush to pass these abortion bans because they had them ready, put together by people who don't understand science, let alone specifically a woman's body when it comes to pregnancy and what happens. But it's so vague that doctors don't know what to do, lawyers have to get involved, and women are put in these horrific situations. So in any event, you can look into that for more information. As far as will this actually end up on the ballot? I mean, it's a long shot, as most of the politicians in this state do not support abortion in really most shapes or forms. As this state now has one of the strictest abortion laws on the books. However, you never know. Stravrinakis did say it's too early to have a proposed timeline on this bill if it could become law. And again, although it has support, especially from the people of this state, it's going to be tough for him to work across the aisle to convince them to let the people decide this issue. A newly released document reveals that a former sergeant within the Charleston County Sheriff's Office approved a use of force incident that ultimately led to criminal charges against an ex-deputy. Timothy Carroll was demoted from sergeant to master deputy on December 1st after an investigation revealed he reviewed the incident where body camera video showed former deputy James Hank Carter assaulting a suspect, but, quote, failed to address the incident further, end quote. Previous to this discipline, he had been placed on paid administrative leave. So you may remember the story. We talked about it before. This is that incident where a deputy was chasing a suspect, found him kind of kneeled behind a residence, punched him in the head, which led him to the ground, and continued to punch him another 7 or 8 times, somewhere in that range, and may have used a racial slur while also dealing with this suspect. Regardless of the slur part we talked about, he clearly used excessive force. So what the story is about his supervisor basically seeing that footage and then doing nothing about it. So on October 21st is when that excessive force and alleged assault, we'll see what the courts decide with that, happened, where Carter hit Rashard Duncan repeatedly in the face after both a car and foot chase in Hollywood, South Carolina. Sheriff's Office policy requires supervisors who are monitoring a pursuit to share all documentation through the chain of command according to their policy by next duty day or as soon as practical after a pursuit or incident occurs. The Office of Professional Standards was not aware of the incident until November 7th, which was 17 days after the incident occurred. So not only did the supervisors see this, they are authorized to take immediate disciplinary action if they observe something that's egregious, any kind of egregious act during a pursuit. Somehow he saw this video, didn't tell anybody about it, and also didn't take any action. Now, Carter, who was the one who hit the suspect, was ultimately fired on November 9th after the video was reviewed by Sheriff Kristen Graziano. Now, Carroll, the supervisor, can reapply for his sergeant position after the probationary period ends. He did not appeal his demotion, so he will basically he accepted it and has an opportunity to get his position back. He can reapply after probationary period ends. An update in Mount Pleasant, a pair of ordinances aimed at enhancing penalties for hate crimes in the town is one step closer to becoming official. This past Tuesday, I mentioned on Monday's podcast of last week that town council was going to have a meeting where this was going to be brought up. And on Tuesday, they approved the first reading of those two ordinances, which both passed at the Police, Judicial, and Legal Committee meeting that was held last Monday. Now, the proposed hate intimidation ordinance would add another layer of penalties against someone who commits a crime based on factors such as race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, or a disability, among other categories. Another item that was passed was to amend an ordinance on handbills, which basically will make it illegal to distribute any type of, handout, flyer, whatever it may be, at private residences, except for newspapers and traditional snail mail. The amendment would also add increased punishment for a violation involving intimidation or threat. So if you're handing out something, a handbill, a flyer about, a garage sale, you could face a penalty. But obviously, the main focus of this was anything involving hate, which has been distributed within Mount Pleasant over the last few months. You can be punished either way, but anything that involves intimidation or hate will have an extra layer as far as the penalties are concerned. Now, the idea for the hate crime legislation on this local level came up in October, after leaders said hundreds of anti-Semitic flyers were distributed throughout several Mount Pleasant neighborhoods. So that's what I was referencing just a few moments ago. And why is it specific that legislation is coming on the local level? Well, that's because on the state level, as we've mentioned a million times, there is no hate crime legislation in South Carolina, one of only 2 states in this nation that does not have any. So Mount Pleasant decided to take matters in their own hands as it relates to these specific threats and incidents that happened. Now, if passed, violations of the ordinances could result in a misdemeanor charge, a fine of up to $500, and or up to 30 days in jail. The ordinances will come before a council in a month for the second reading. So still some steps to go before this is actually implemented, but it has cleared the first hurdle. That'll do it for this edition of Holy City Center Radio. I will see you back here on Wednesday. Regular week here. No plan changes to the podcast schedule for this week. We'll see what the holidays brings. I'll keep you posted. But Wednesday and Friday, we are planning to have shows as normal. Thank you so much for listening. If you have a chance, please rate and review, like this podcast, subscribe to it to make sure you don't miss any shows. And also, if you want to go that extra step this holiday season, go to patreon.com/Holy City Center. Big thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Sound System, who produces this and every episode of Holy City Center Radio. And also thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every show as well. Although I've already said it, a big thank you to all of you. I am greatly appreciative of everyone who listens to this show. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I can't wait to talk to you again on Wednesday. Until then, good night and good luck.